Hey everyone! So I think it's about time we finish up the rust work on the cab for this little Unimog 421 project. Because really the only thing that's left to do is the roof. So let's get to it. So I have been working on this some more since you last saw it. I finished up all the stuff I had going on with this rear wall back here. And also I've been fixing up the rest of the floor over here on the driver's side. You might remember that we had a big hole back here that's been patched up. And also this part in here with the whole transmission tunnel square in here, that was all rotted out and it was really completely gone. So I've been cutting out that whole bottom section and making a new frame underneath that and fixing up that whole side. So that means that really the whole bottom part of this cab is done. Okay, that's a lie actually. I'm missing this part right here. There's still a little hole. But to fix that, I'm going to have to remove this bracing, and I don't really want to do that yet, so that's the reason I left that. It's not really a big deal, but I want to keep the stuff in here for the roof. So, other than that, the whole bottom part is done. And that means we just have to do this roof. But there is a reason I've been saving this for last, because this is going to be quite a big job. I've been looking at it a lot and there really is no easy way to do it. I'm going to have to cut the whole roof off. And then I can cut off all of these gutters here. And then I can cut off these panels both on the inside and out here in the doors. And only then can I start fixing up the pillars and this whole rear wall, the top part of that. Once that is done, I can make new gutters, I can make new panels, and I can refit the roof. So this is going to be quite a big and time-consuming project. But I'm not going to make it exactly like it was from the factory, because it's just really not very good. There is a reason they rust up here, because there is a lot of different pieces of metal that are overlapping each other right here. That creates a lot of small internal cavities that you really can't rust protect. Once the moisture gets in there, it starts rusting from the inside out. So that's why it's a common problem on this type of cab to see rust up along that gutter. So I am going to simplify a lot of this structure around here, not only to try and avoid those overlaps, but also to make it more simple for me to do this, because it does have a lot of rounded parts and curvy things, and that's going to be tricky enough as it is. So yeah, I'm going to simplify it a bit, but I am going to make something that looks like this. But even so, there are a few critical points that I am going to have to match. One of them being this top part of the door. This has to be in the same place, otherwise my doors are probably not going to fit right. And also, this whole edge all the way across there, that is going to have to be in exactly the same place, otherwise I'm not going to be able to get my front windshield back in. And this is quite a long curvy piece, so this is probably going to be the more tricky part to do, or at least the more time-consuming part. Now enough about that. I'm going to start taking some measurements and make a few marks so I know where everything is, and then I'm going to cut that roof off. So before I started cutting, I just wanted to show you just how bad this gutter really is, because it's much easier to see from up here. You can see that most of it is missing completely. And also there were some old repairs done on this roof line, but they were not done very well. You can still see the line where this was cut. Some of it is not even attached at all, and it never was. The rest of it only has a few lumpy spot welds along here, so this was just not built to last with what they did here. All right, now I can really show you what's going on up here. This stuff is barely holding on. I'm actually kind of surprised it's still here. This is very rotten. So now I can also try and show you what I've been talking about with the water, moisture, rust issue in this whole gutter roof assembly of these cabs. Now, first of all, I will point out it does have a few holes down here in the different pillars and in the back wall as well, where the water can run down or drain out. But for the water to get here, the whole thing kind of has to move a little bit. And the problem typically occurs when they are just parked, especially in our climate where it's very humid, we get a lot of condensation, and that stuff collects on the inside of the roof. And because the roof is curved, it's going to run down and into this outer edge of the roof assembly. Now this one does have drain holes here, but they are obviously not supposed to be there, so you can kind of tell by the angle of this that if water gets in here, it's going to run down to this corner and it has nowhere to go from there. So this whole part can just be filled up with water. And also for something like the gutter itself, this is one continuous piece coming out, then having this little dip in it, and then it folds around on itself, creating this gutter here. Now, wait, there's actually a piece of roof here. This is some of the original roof that's left. So you can see that the roof, it tugs underneath this edge of the gutter out here. And that's really how the roof is held in place, that this is brought over the edge of the roof and then clamped down, and that's what holds the whole thing together. The problem with that is that means you now have some overlapping pieces of metal, and also the roof comes over and covers this little dip down here. So that's also just going to be hollow, and there's no way to get into all of this stuff. So eventually this is just going to have moisture in it and rust out, and there's not really anything you can do about it because it comes from the inside and out. Another part is this section here on the back wall where the outer skin and the inner skin, they come up here and they are connected by this piece right here, which is what carries on out and folds around and becomes the gutter out here. But it's now overlapping these two parts, which means that once again you have a section here where you have enclosed metal that you just can't get in to seal and protect. And that's why the rear wall looks like this up here in the top. Now there's a few more issues here and there, but I think you get the point. But in their defense, I will say this is of course still a very old design. So I'm not out here trying to say they've done a bad job or anything. I mean, after all, it is still here after, what, 50 something? Nearly 60 years. But what I am trying to say is that not only would this stuff be very difficult for me to try and replicate exactly as it was, but it also wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because there are several points that could be improved a bit, or at least done differently. I'm still contemplating exactly how I'm going to do this, but I can say already now there are a few things that are going to be completely left out. One of them being these vents right here. Well, you can't see that's a vent. You can see it from in here. It has this little plastic. Yeah, that doesn't work. But they are just simple vents that take air in from out here in front of the windshield, and you should have been able to open that and let the fresh breeze into your face. But this was only something that was on a few of the cabs. Most of them didn't have this, so I'm just going to get rid of that entirely. I really have no need for it, so no need to try and waste time replicating that. And another thing are these inner panels. I am not going to make them this tall. I'm going to leave out most of this stuff and only have a little angle down here just to retain some of the strength. I'm probably going to go from that bend right in there on the rear wall, and that is probably going to be my height all the way around. Because if I leave this part much more open, it's going to be a lot easier for me to get to the inside when I reattach the roof and get in there and fix up and seal all that stuff really good. And these really don't serve any purpose for me. The only reason they are this tall is because they were holding the roof liner. Well, it wasn't really even a liner. It was like a piece of masonite covered in plastic, and that thing really wasn't good for much, maybe other than just falling down over time. Actually, that's still in my 416. I could just go and show you. So this is inside the 416, and you can see that these panels here, they are just holding this hard roof liner masonite piece of something up here, and it's not doing anything for the insulation or sound deadening or anything. And also this is just bending and deforming and coming down everywhere. So I won't be putting this stuff into the 421. Also, getting rid of this gives you a good bit of extra headroom in these cabs. Now once that other cab is all done and painted, I might just go ahead and dress the inside of the roof itself with some sound deadening stuff and maybe some fabric just to make it look nice, but I don't really know yet. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, I'm not going to be doing this. I'm just going to start cutting out some of this stuff and try to work out what is going to be the best simple way to do this. Now I am going to do it in small sections at a time just to try and keep everything where it's supposed to be. And yeah, I'll probably just end up doing what I usually do and just make it up as I go. So I was looking at ways that I could build this, and I figured instead of trying to shape this out of just some thin sheet metal like it was, I'm just going to put some angled steel up here. That's going to make it a lot easier and a lot stronger. And you might already be thinking, well, you can't just have this straight edge as your gutter, but I'm going to have the roof come down and attach to the top here. So I'm going to have to angle this to line it up with the roof, and just like that, we now have the gutter right along here. And it's all in one piece. There's no overlapping stuff that water can get into. And also it has a nice thick rounded edge here, so I don't have a sharp edge exposed or anything. So yeah, I think this is what I'm doing. This is going to be a lot more simple and a lot stronger. I also just wanted to show you the inside of the roof here, because you can see how rusty this stuff is all along the edge. And you can pretty much tell where those inner top panels, they came up and closed off those sections. So this stuff was just never even painted in the first place. This yellow color, that is the factory paint. You can see a little bit came through here where there is the cabin light, which was obviously not mounted when they painted this, but a little bit of paint came through there. But everything else was just never painted because those panels come up and close off that inner corners, so you just can't get anything in there. So that's another major reason why they rust so much up there in the roof line. And you can also see that it does have patches all the way from here on one side and across the whole back of the roof and all the way up to there. This part has already rusted out once before and been repaired, well, not very well, but they did put new metal in here. But even this stuff was never painted or protected, again, because you have those big panels coming up, so you just can't get to the inside of this. So as I was working out how to repair this rear end, I figured there's no point in leaving any of this. I'm just gonna get rid of this whole top inner panel here, because it really doesn't serve any purpose at this point. And then furthermore, I got to thinking, why would I even need the gutter here on the back of the cab? It doesn't serve any purpose back here, maybe keeping a little bit of that roof water off the rear window, but honestly, that's just not very important. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time rebuilding this gutter. I'm just going to tie the roof itself directly into the back and getting rid of all this stuff. That's going to make it much more simple, and it's going to make it a much more lasting repair as well. Because instead of having a repair piece on the roof and then a repair piece for the gutter and another repair piece down here for the back wall, I'm just going to make one single piece tying all of this stuff together, getting rid of the gutter and getting rid of this stuff, leaving it open on the inside. So you can actually get into the back of it and tidy it up and paint it and do all that stuff to make it last a lot longer. And it's also going to be much quicker to do this. So that's what we're doing. Interestingly, this roof does have some pretty big dents on the inside that are not visible on the outside. Someone's put a lot of filler in this. Right, so now I have the roof more or less back in place where I want it to be. But before I can really start locking it down, there is a few more things I have to take care of, and one of them is perhaps the most tricky part of this whole process, and that is this whole gutter out here in the front. Now, I've been looking at that quite a lot, trying to figure out the best way that I could make something like that, and I do still want to make it in this angled steel that I've been using on the sides. But the problem is, this needs to have a nice big curve in it all the way around that gets a bit tighter out here in the corners. But I have noticed, if you look at it from this angle, it is actually flat this way. Well, that's going to help me a little bit, because that means that if I lay out a piece of this on a flat surface and then curve it around to match the one that is on there, and once I go and put it up here, it's naturally going to be angled to give me that gutter effect. Now, the big problem is that trying to curve this angled steel here, that is going to be quite difficult. And really the only way that I can do it to make it look at least somewhat decent is by heating this up a whole lot. But unfortunately, I don't have an oxyacetylene torch or anything else that can reliably heat something like this. But we do have that at my workplace, and I am allowed to borrow that. Only problem is, I'm gonna have to go out there to do it. So now the plan is, well, first of all, right now that gutter is really what's holding most of this stuff in place. So I'm gonna brace everything a bit more, and also this center pole that I have right here, I'm gonna weld all that in place so that everything else is held in place really nicely. And then I'm going to delicately cut out this gutter so that it retains its shape. And then I'm going to bring this stuff out to my workplace, and we're going to see if we can go and replicate that shape in some angled steel. Check out this vintage Volvo that we have in here. This is a 1966, so it's the same generation as the Unimog that we're doing. We have the transmission out of it. This vehicle is owned by a museum, and we have it in here to replace the clutch. Thought some of you might find this cool. Anyway, let's get back to work. Right, so it's not the biggest table that I have available for doing this, but all the other ones we have are made from wood, so this will have to do. But I'm just gonna have to do one half of this, then move it all over and do the other half. check this out. Oh yes, that is nice. That is like within a few millimeters. I'm really happy with that. I did get one little stress crack up here in the last bend, but that's all right. I'll just give it a little cut and weld that back up. I am gonna have to make a few relief cuts in this vertical edge as well, because that's bending in a bit. But that's all right. This is still a lot better than what I could have done at home. So after a lot of grinding and welding and grinding and welding some more, I finally have this whole gutter assembly all locked in place and solidly mounted where I want it to be. And it should be even stronger than it was originally. So now I have this nice edge all along here to mount my roof to. But before I put that roof back in, there is one final piece we have to put in place, and that is this whole front section here. And the most important part of this is this edge right here. This has to be back in exactly the same place, because that is what my front windshield mounts up to. Now, I'm going to be making this mostly the way that it was originally, in two halves that are folded down and joined here in this ridge right here. But I am going to do one half at a time. So I'm going to start by cutting out the rest of this front section, and then I'm going to make a new piece for that, and I'm going to use the remaining rear section to shape it. So I'm going to bring it down and fold it up against the remaining edge of this rear one. That's also why I went and braced that a bit more. Then once the front section is done, I can cut out the rest of the rear section, make a new piece for that, and shape it against the other piece. I don't know if that made any sense to you, but I'm just going to start doing it and you'll see what I mean. If this even works out the way that I hope it will. Alright, so now we also have the back half of this portion in place and tacked together roughly where I want it to be. I am going to be adding some little braces across here that will strengthen the whole thing and also close up these gaps here. And I have to finish up the sides out here, but before I can do that, I'm going to need this last top piece of these door frames. But I'm not going to make that exactly the way that it was either. It was a two-piece section with that inner panel coming up there. But instead, I'm just going to make a simple flat 2mm piece that I bent down to meet this edge right here on both sides. So I have something to mount my door trim to. And once those last few bits are in place, I can go ahead and fully weld all this stuff that I build up here and clean it up, and we can finally put that roof back on. You know, I just realized something. Now that I have everything up there fully welded and everything is locked in place, I don't need these things anymore. I can go ahead and cut out all of these braces I put in here. I've been kind of looking forward to this because that's going to make the whole thing look so much closer to being done. And it's also going to give me a lot more room to work when we go and put that roof in. The roof does have another really big dent right here in the corner, and this has also just been covered up with filler. Now, I was going to leave that until I have the roof in place, and I had to do this back part anyway, but looking at it now, I think it'll actually be easier to knock this out first. So even with all my measuring and markings and aligning, sometimes the most reliable thing is just to take a few steps back and just look at it. And honestly, this is looking pretty spot on. If anything, the top corner over there on the driver's side has to come down just a little bit, but it will. I can see there's still a gap there. I haven't tagged it in place yet because I'm going to be replacing that little rusty bit. But other than that, this is actually looking really good. Let's lock this in place. Right, so I finally have the roof firmly attached back on here, and that means we are getting close to the end of this whole ordeal. The only thing I really have left to do, at least on the outside, is this back portion here. So I'm going to start cutting out whatever they had going on up here, and I'm just going to make one piece to close off this whole back wall. Or actually, it's going to be 3 pieces. I'm going to continue these 3 sections that are back here. But it is just going to be a smooth back wall. There's not going to be a gutter or anything back here. And I wish I could tell you there was a good reason I made this extra little cut here, but there's not. I just cut that wrong. So I have this weird little extra hole to fill out as well. I don't know who needs to hear this, but please don't drill holes and screws directly into your roof. It ruins it forever, because it's really difficult to weld up these little pinholes without heavily distorting a big piece of sheet metal like this. If you want to mount something up here, use like a railing or a roof rack or something like that and put your stuff onto that instead. It's going to be a much better long-term solution. Alright, so finally I have this whole roof back in place, and it's stronger than it has been for a really long time, so I'm pretty happy with this. And this really means that we are done with all the rust work on this cab. Well, at least for the videos, that is. I do still have a little bit left to do. I have to finish up my back wall on the inside in there. Also, I have all those little pinholes in the roof and this little corner down here that I can get to now. But that's all pretty basic and simple stuff, so I won't be filming all of that because it's just more of what you've been seeing in the past few videos anyway. Now, I know it has taken me quite a while to get done with this part of the project, but there is a couple of reasons for that, and one of them being what I've been saying all along, that this is just very slow and tedious work. And on top of that, I ended up doing it the even more slow way by building all of these replacement panels myself. Now, I didn't really set out to do that, but somewhere along the line it just became a bit of a personal challenge to me to see if I could make all of those panels with just the basic tools that I have here at home. And honestly, I think it ended up working out pretty well, and it even saved me a lot of money doing it like that. But another reason is that this is just not my favorite kind of work, so it does take a little bit of motivation for me to go over here and get going on it, especially in those cold winter days. But those cold winter days are really the main reason, because I knew as we were coming into the winter season, I would not be able to paint this thing anyway. It would just simply be too cold over here. So even if I did get it done, it would just sit around here and wait for some warmer weather. So there was really no rush to get it done. But now we are coming into the spring, so hopefully we're gonna see some warmer temperatures pretty soon, which means we can get to painting this. So now I have all the reason in the world to get this done and ready. So as usual, I just want to thank you all for watching along, and I'll see you in the next one.